In a time when leadership came from judges and faith flickered like a candle in the wind, there lived a woman named Hannah. She resided in the hill country of Ephraim, alongside her husband Elkanah, a man of sincere devotion who made the annual pilgrimage to the sacred tabernacle in Shiloh to offer worship to the Lord. To the outside world, their life may have seemed peaceful, but within Hannah's soul, there was a sorrow so heavy it threatened to consume her. Hannah bore a pain that society couldn't see, yet one that defined her existence. She was unable to have children. In that culture, infertility was not just a personal tragedy, it was a public shame, a sentence of invisibility. A woman without children was often treated as if she held no value, no future, no identity. And to make matters worse, Elkanah had another wife, Peninnah, who never let Hannah forget what she lacked. Peninnah had children, and her home rang with laughter and noise. Every day she reminded Hannah, sometimes through cutting words, other times through smug glances, that she was a mother, and Hannah was not. Her comments came wrapped in sarcasm, designed to sting while appearing innocent. But Hannah absorbed them all, never fighting back. Not because she had no anger, but because she understood something deeper was at play. Her pain wasn't just from being childless. It was from the silence of heaven. Each year, Hannah followed Elkanah to Shiloh. She prayed quietly, fervently, but the answers never seemed to come. Still, she kept hoping. It was a silent battle fought within the walls of her own home, a war without shouting, but one filled with emotional wounds. The sound of Peninnah's children playing outside pierced through her like a cruel reminder. And when Peninnah said with mock concern, "If you had kids, you'd know how exhausting it is," Hannah remained silent, not out of weakness, but because her struggle wasn't with Peninnah. It was with a God who had yet to answer. Elkanah, seeing her distress, tried to console her with kind words. "Hannah, why do you cry? Aren't I better to you than 10 sons?" he asked, genuinely trying to fill the void. But Hannah's grief ran deeper than any comfort he could provide. There was a fire inside her soul, unspoken but fiercely alive, a yearning that no human voice could soothe. Year after year, the routine stayed the same. Trips to Shiloh, silent prayers, the same sting from Peninnah's passive-aggressive remarks. Yet beneath the sorrow, something was shifting. Like dry ground waiting for rain, Hannah's spirit was quietly preparing for change. She refused to give up, even when everything around her gave her every reason to. The story of Hannah wasn't finished. Though no one around her could see it, something powerful was beginning to unfold. Because sometimes the silence of God isn't a rejection. It's the calm before a miracle. He saw how deeply Anna was hurting. He tried to comfort her with gentle words and acts of care, but even his most loving gestures couldn't reach the aching emptiness she carried inside. Although his heart was kind, his attention was divided between Anna and his other wife, Peninnah. And that imbalance, though subtle, made Anna feel even more alone. While Peninnah proudly embraced her children, Anna would retreat inward, into a quiet space of reflection, an inner world where faith still flickered, even in her darkest moments. That year, as they made their annual pilgrimage to the tabernacle in Shiloh, something was different. Anna's anguish had intensified. Every jab from Peninnah, every smug glance, had piled up like stones on her chest, making it harder and harder to breathe. When they arrived, Anna felt a breaking point stir within her, one she could no longer suppress. With quiet determination, she stepped away from the others, her heart burning with sorrow, and sought solitude in the presence of God. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed, and the tears she had held back for so long finally broke free, like rain pouring after years of drought. Her prayer wasn't loud. She didn't raise her voice. In fact, her lips barely moved. But the pain behind every whisper was deafening to heaven. Anyone watching might have assumed she was lost in her thoughts or disconnected from reality. But Anna knew. God was listening. With her heart exposed, she made a vow she had never dared to utter before. If the Lord gave her a son, she would dedicate him entirely to God's service, for all the days of his life. This wasn't a desperate plea or an empty promise. It was a genuine offering from a woman willing to give back the very thing she desired most, trusting that her deepest longing could serve a purpose far beyond herself. Nearby, Eli, the priest, noticed her from afar. He saw her lips moving without a sound and misunderstood what he was seeing. Approaching her with a stern tone, he said, "How long will you stay drunk? Put away your wine." But Anna, despite her grief, answered with grace. She wasn't intoxicated. She was pouring out her soul before the Lord in a way that words alone could never capture. She explained her pain, her silent cries, her hope. Eli's expression softened as he realized his mistake. His voice shifted, and with a blessing he said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." That moment left a mark on Anna's heart, like a seed planted in a once barren soil. She stood up, wiped her tears, and something had clearly changed. Her eyes carried a peace that hadn't been there before. Not because her circumstances had suddenly changed, but because her faith had. From that day forward, something inside Anna had shifted. Her daily life remained the same. Penina was still there. The household still echoed with children that weren't hers, and her womb remained empty. Yet something was different. There was a stillness within her now, a quiet hope that gave her strength. It was as if God had whispered a promise into her heart, and Anna walked in that promise with quiet confidence. Days passed and time flowed gently forward. Anna continued with her routine, but now every action felt anchored in renewed belief. Elkanah, her husband, couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he noticed she didn't weep as she once did. The harsh words of Penina didn't land the same way anymore. They were like arrows that missed their mark. Something had changed, and though no one else could see it, Anna knew. She and God shared a secret hope. And then the first signs arrived. A subtle change in her body, a quiet shift here and there, small but unmistakable. Anna's heart began to race. It wasn't long before the truth became clear. She was pregnant. The blessing that once seemed unreachable was now alive within her. The prayer whispered at the tabernacle, Eli's words of encouragement, the deep pain and surrender, all of it began to weave together, forming a divine narrative that Anna was now part of. Joy flooded her soul, but it wasn't just personal happiness. Anna knew this child was more than a gift. He was a living testament to the faithfulness of God. Each day of her pregnancy reminded her that miracles still happen, even when the world seems silent. And this miracle wouldn't just change Anna's life. It would become a turning point in Israel's story. When the time came, Hanna gave birth to a son. Samuel was born on an ordinary day, but his arrival carried the mark of the extraordinary. For Hanna, holding him in her arms was like embracing a living promise. She looked into the small, delicate face of the boy and knew that every detail of his being was a divine answer. He was not merely the child she had longed for. He was the symbol that God hears those who cry out with a sincere heart. The first months with Samuel were filled with joy and reverence. Hanna cared for him with tenderness, but every touch carried the weight of a vow. The time she would have with him was limited. She had not forgotten the promise made in the tabernacle. Each time Samuel smiled or cooed, her heart ached, knowing she had consecrated him to the Lord before he was even conceived. Still, she did not allow sorrow to overtake her. Instead, she cherished every moment, rocking him, whispering lullabies while he slept. Elkanah, by her side, understood the depth of what it meant. Though he loved his son deeply, he respected Hannah's vow. Together, they shared the understanding that Samuel was not only a gift, but also an offering. The years passed quickly, like a breeze before a great storm. As Samuel learned to walk and speak, the moment Hanna had long prepared for drew near. She waited until he was old enough to live without her, old enough to be entrusted to the Lord's service in Shiloh. The pain of letting him go shadowed her heart, but Hanna knew she was fulfilling something greater than herself. When the day finally arrived, she took Samuel by the hand and, with Elkanah, began the journey to the tabernacle. Her heart was a whirlwind of emotions, joy, sorrow, gratitude. But she walked forward, knowing this decision would shape not only Samuel's life, but her faith. As they reached the sacred space in Shiloh, Hanna felt the full weight of her promise. Samuel stood at her side, no longer a baby, but a young boy. She approached Eli, the priest who had once misunderstood her silent prayer. Now she stood before him with calm resolve, holding Samuel's hand tightly. Her voice was gentle but unwavering. "I am the woman who stood beside you, praying to the Lord. This is the child I prayed for, and the Lord granted my request. So now I give him to the Lord. For all his days he is given to the Lord." Eli looked at the boy, then at Hannah, and saw the depth of the moment. With a solemn nod, he received Samuel into the care of the tabernacle, to serve before the Lord. Though her heart was heavy, Hannah felt a profound peace. She was keeping her promise, offering her most precious treasure into God's hands. Before she left, Hannah raised her voice in a song of praise, a hymn of gratitude for God's faithfulness and mercy. Her words echoed through the tabernacle, stirring the hearts of all who heard. "He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap." Her song was more than thanksgiving. It was a declaration of unshakable faith in God's power to transform lives. After the final note faded, Hannah knelt and hugged Samuel tightly, whispering words of love and courage into his ear. She knew he was safe in the Lord's care. With hope in her heart, she returned home, trusting that God would guide Samuel's every step. And so Samuel began his journey in the tabernacle, growing in the presence of the Lord and in the eyes of all who beheld him. And so Anna returned home. But a piece of her heart remained in the tabernacle at Shiloh. The absence of Samuel became a constant breeze in her life, a sweet and aching reminder of the boy she had given to the Lord. Yet her heart was filled with peace. Every prayer she whispered carried thanks. Thanks for the privilege of being the mother of a child destined to serve the Almighty God. Though physically apart, Anna knew Samuel was in the safest hands possible, the hands of his Creator. Meanwhile, in the tabernacle, Samuel began walking the path he had been born to follow. Under Eli's guidance, he learned the sacred rituals, the responsibilities of service. Each story he heard about God's power lit a spark of wonder in his heart. Day by day, he walked closer to the purpose etched into his soul. But Samuel wasn't just learning. He was being watched. Eli, now aged and wise, saw something different in the boy. There was a natural obedience in Samuel, a light in his eyes that spoke of something divine. Visitors to the tabernacle noticed it too. Though still young, Samuel carried a quiet strength, a maturity that could only come from God. And every year, Anna returned to see her son. She never came empty-handed. She brought new clothes, each one sewn with love, each stitch a silent prayer, a whispered blessing. With every visit, she saw Samuel not only growing in height, but in grace. God was clearly shaping that boy for something extraordinary. Years passed, and Samuel changed, not just in appearance, but in presence, in the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. He was being guided, molded by the very hand of God. Anna saw it, and her heart overflowed with gratitude. The boy she once handed over to the Lord was becoming something more than she ever imagined. And God, in his boundless kindness, did not forget Anna. He saw her faithfulness, and he answered with blessings beyond her wildest dreams. After Samuel, Anna gave birth to 5 more children, 3 boys, 2 girls. A home once silent with sorrow now rang with laughter and little footsteps. Each child was proof that God doesn't just fulfill promises, he does it abundantly. Still, no matter how full her home became, Anna never forgot Samuel. He remained the sacred bridge between her ordinary life and the divine plan God was unfolding in Israel. And in those quiet moments, as she cared for her younger children, she would think of Samuel's face, Eli's words, and the song she sang the day she surrendered him to the Lord. It made her smile, because she knew Samuel was part of something far greater. And then, one quiet night, in the stillness of Shiloh, Samuel lay resting near the ark of God. Silence blanketed the tabernacle, until a voice broke through the hush. A name spoken gently. Samuel, clear, firm but soft enough to feel like a whisper to the soul. God was calling. Samuel's eyes flickered open, his mind foggy with sleep. Yet something stirred him, a voice unmistakably real. Without hesitation, he pushed aside the remnants of sleep and quietly made his way to Eli's room. His young heart was certain. The priest must have called for him. "Did you call me?" he asked, his voice soft, his gaze still heavy with drowsiness. But Eli, startled and clearly puzzled, gently shook his head. "No, my son, return to your bed and rest." Obediently, Samuel turned back. But just as he began to drift off again, the voice returned, clearer, unwavering, calling his name once more. He rose again, sure he couldn't be mistaken, and walked swiftly to Eli. Yet again the old priest reassured him, "I did not call you, my son. Go back and lie down." When the voice came a third time, something changed. Eli, though aged and weary, sensed a deeper reality unfolding. His eyes, though tired, began to reflect awareness. He looked at Samuel with a seriousness that silenced the boy's uncertainty. "Listen carefully," he said. "If the voice calls again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel nodded, not fully grasping the weight of the moment, but something about Eli's words stirred a strange peace inside him, as though the very walls of the tabernacle were holding their breath. Then it happened again. The voice, calm and steady, called out Samuel's name, and this time the boy answered as he had been told, his voice trembling but obedient. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." In that sacred instant, the veil between the divine and the earthly seemed to part. God began revealing to Samuel truths that would forever shape the future of Israel. Revelations so heavy, so profound, that no child could fully comprehend their depth. Samuel, once just a quiet servant in the temple shadows, was now face to face with the voice of the Almighty. As God spoke, Samuel stood silently, awe gripping his young heart. Though he couldn't yet understand the full meaning of the message, something deep within told him this moment was not ordinary. This was divine commissioning, an anointing of purpose that would outlast his youth and mark him as a voice for a nation. The words continued to flow, shaping a future both challenging and destined. And when the voice ceased, the stillness that followed was unlike any before. The air inside the tabernacle felt thick with the weight of what had just occurred, as though even the holy space itself knew a new chapter had begun. The next morning, Samuel approached Eli slowly, unsure how to share what had been revealed. But the priest, calm and knowing, encouraged him to speak every word. Samuel recounted everything, and as he spoke, Eli's face held both acceptance and sorrow. He recognized the hand of God in the end of an era, the rise of a new messenger. Samuel grew not only in age but in wisdom and spiritual stature. It became undeniable to everyone around him. God's presence rested on him. No longer merely a boy promised to the Lord, Samuel emerged as a prophet, destined to guide a wandering people. His words carried weight. His presence brought clarity in times of confusion. In a season marked by disobedience, Samuel stood as a beacon of divine direction. Meanwhile, far from Shiloh, Hanna continued her life in Ramah. Though separated by distance, her prayers never ceased. She heard whispers of her son's rising influence. The child she once cradled in pain and hope was now a man carrying God's message. Her faith, once poured out in anguish at the altar, had become a river of legacy that transformed not just her family, but her nation. The story of Hanna and Samuel isn't just about answered prayers. It's about surrender, trust, and how quiet faith can reshape generations. Hanna, an ordinary woman with an extraordinary burden, chose to give everything to God. Her tears became seeds, and Samuel was the harvest, an enduring testimony of how heaven responds to the cries of a faithful heart. Through her honest vow, Hanna revealed a profound truth. Faith isn't about eloquent words or polished speeches, but about a heart that's broken yet fully surrendered to the one who holds all power. Her quiet desperation became a powerful testimony that the God of the universe listens, even when no one else seems to notice. Alone in the tabernacle, with tears streaming and lips trembling, it may have seemed to the world that her pain was going unnoticed. But God was paying close attention to every whispered word and every tear that fell. He not only heard her unspoken prayers, he responded in a way that turned her sorrow into celebration and her disgrace into divine honor. Hannah's journey reminds us that even in our darkest seasons, when everything feels uncertain and hope seems out of reach, trusting in God is never in vain. More than that, her story unveils the immense power of living with purpose. She didn't plead for a child to fulfill a personal dream. Before she ever held Samuel in her arms, she had already placed him in God's hands. That selfless act of surrender allowed her son to grow into a prophetic voice that would shift the spiritual direction of an entire nation. Sometimes the things we give up to God return to us in ways far greater than we could have crafted ourselves. Hannah also teaches us a rare kind of gratitude and unwavering loyalty. Even after receiving far more than she ever expected, she remained faithful to the promise she made. Her life became a living example that God not only keeps his word, but does so with an overflowing generosity that defies logic. Her story isn't just about one miraculous answer to prayer. It's about a God who turns anguish into assignment, heartbreak into hope, and personal faith into a legacy that impacts generations. Like Hannah, we're invited to trust with open hands, to release what matters most, and to wait with expectation. The same God who heard her cry is still listening today. And what he has planned for your life might exceed your boldest dreams. If this story moved you and you want to dive deeper into more powerful journeys of faith and transformation, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and hit that subscribe button. Together, let's continue discovering life-changing truths from the Word of God.